Hello, and welcome to Dispel Magic, the podcast where we overthink how the magic of D&D might shape your campaign in surprising and unexpected ways. I'm Benjamin, game designer and writer. You can find me on Twitter at SterlingVermin and the internet at large at sterlingvermin.com.
And my name's Dane. I'm a dungeon master, podcaster, and voice actor. I'm everywhere online at Dane in Danger. We are veering off the known path.
That's right. Today we're talking about something a little different.
A little different.
Not our typical fare of spells, not our uncommon fare of monsters or magic items. We're talking about a class today. We're talking about wizards. How cool is that, huh?
Well, I think it's appropriate because wizards are the main magic users of a setting. Mm-hmm. They're what people think of when they think of Dungeons and Dragons. That's
first among equals when it comes to magic spellcasters.
One could say that. If we're talking about the magic of D&D, then the magic users of D&D need to be explored as well.
Right. Just like with spells, creatures, and items, when we talk about a class like wizard, we're going to zoom in on the specific characteristics that have implications broader than are generally acknowledged in D&D. The wizard class is arguably the best example of a character class that has a lot of implications that are rarely followed through on in D&D settings, and we're going to get into exactly what those characteristics are soon. The low-hanging fruit of the class is its massive spell list, complete with tons of utility spells that we frequently discuss on the show, and Ritual Caster, which lets them use all of those utility spells without expending spell slots. Of the 19 spells we've discussed so far on the show, the wizard class gets 13 of them. So by and large, when we've talked about the concept of hedge mages, or NPCs that aren't adventurers but have learned a bit of magic to perform as part of a job, we're probably talking about baby wizards.
Baby wizards.
However, by far, the most impactful feature that wizards have is their spellcasting feature. Not because it grants them access to spells, although we wouldn't be talking about them if they didn't, but because of how they learn their spells. Wizards prepare spells out of their spellbook every day and can add 2 spells to their spellbook each time they level up. But, critically, they can also copy spells from other wizard spellbooks. Dane, tell us about it.
I will. That's what I'm here for, to tell them about the things. Copying a spell into the book. When you find a wizard spell of first level or higher, you can add it to your spellbook. If it is of a spell level you can prepare, and if you can spare the time to decipher and copy it. Copying that spell into your spellbook involves reproducing the basic form of the spell, then deciphering the unique system of notation used by the wizard who wrote it. You must practice the spell until you understand the sounds or gestures required, then transcribe it into your spellbook using your own notation. For each level of the spell, the process takes 2 hours and costs 50 GP. The cost represents material components you expend as you experiment with the spell to master it, as well as the fine inks you need to record it. Once you have spent this time and money, you can prepare the spell just like your other spells.
The expected outcomes, I think the reason that this exists in the game, first of all, is that it's kind of fun. There's a little bit of like a Pokemon
Gotta catch them all.
element to this, yeah.
Gotta copy them all, decipher
it's like
them all.
just super fun to add new options into your spellbook, and now you've got a way to do that, which I think probably is also primarily kind of the hook here, is that it's meant to be a kind of low impact treasure or reward to give to your wizard characters.
Here's a couple of spells.
Yeah.
What way to go?
The fighter gets a +1 sword. The wizard gets to add 3 spells they didn't know to their spellbook.
What I didn't realize is how proprietary these spellbooks are. According to this, you almost have your own language or cipher that you're using, which is an interesting thing to bring into a setting if you want to make notes to yourself in your own quote-unquote language almost.
Yeah, that is really striking, and something that I had not really been on my mind until I was reviewing this information for this episode, is that that's a lot of time that you're taking to understand what someone else wrote, like remove all of their idiosyncratic notes and then produce your own.
Well, I understand where this comes from mechanically, because you want to feel like you've achieved something, right? You
Right.
can't just give the player the thing.
Yeah.
But in practicality, this is a lot. Takes a lot, and it costs time and money.
Yeah.
And in a D&D game, you could be doing other things.
Right.
You could be
Yeah.
adventuring during
Right.
that
No,
time.
for sure. I mean, it's one of those things where whenever there's a feature or a spell or whatever else that takes time, the question is, what is everybody else doing while you're doing that? I think for the most part, this doesn't take so much time to copy spells that you're going to annoy your party by doing it. But like, if you break into a wizard's house and the goal was to leave it mostly untouched and get out of there, your party is going to be annoyed with you. You're like, oh, please, just like, what? Let's wait here for like 6 hours while I copy this
Just
real
need
quick.
6 quick hours. And it also kind of takes away from wizards' downtime activities. So if they want to be broadening
Right,
their
that's true.
role playing, they can't be searching for
Right.
books or the sage to help them or finding herbs. They're like, well, I guess I spend the day, this is a 4th level spell, so that's the day.
Yeah. I mean, it probably doesn't come up so often that it's that
No.
disappointing, and there's a limit ultimately to how much you
True.
can learn, but
It's expensive, though.
yeah. When I think about this, though, what this component or characteristic of the wizard class implies to me is that wizards teach one another. They learn, or at least they learn from one another. Whether or not they're like proactively teaching, they're learning from one another. It's like
Through their books.
through their books. It doesn't take many jumps to get to, well, if they can learn from each other, they've probably started organizing into some kind of institutions that make it easy to share these spells. Because that might sound altruistic at first, but if you have 3 spells I want, and I have 2 spells you want, it makes a lot more sense for us to just have like a kind of open door policy of getting these things from one another, especially if we're not enemies.
Do you think it still takes the same amount of time and gold to transfer those spells?
That's
if
a
you've got
really
the
good
person
question there to actually kind of interpret it for you. That's a really good question. I mean, there's nothing that says that it's any different, but that is
Yeah.
an interesting point.
As most of these kind of gray area questions,
Yeah.
it goes to the DM.
Yeah.
But rules is written, no.
Yeah.
It takes the
Yeah.
same amount of time. So if you're in these institutions and you're learning these spells from these books or from other wizards, you're spending the whole time in the
I
library.
mean, maybe wizards are verbalizing those idiosyncratic notes even.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe maybe just everybody's conception of exactly what's happening with the spell is slightly different. It could be that magic is idiosyncratic and you and I have to cast a spell different ways.
That's an interesting
That's what I guess
point.
that's what I'm saying. Is
Yeah.
that like Dane casting Magic Mouth might have to be different than Benjamin casting Magic Mouth because you and I do not interact with the weave in the same way, and so we have to.
And it says you experiment with the spell
Right.
to master it. So that makes a lot of sense that each person has to do it their own. They got
way.
their own groove.
Yeah,
Don't throw me off my groove.
exactly. That's the
Concentrating.
phrase I was hoping to get you to say.
It's all leading to this.
Yeah. So anyway, when we talk about institutions, I think there's 2 basic ways those institutions would form, or 2 kind of ideals, I guess. 2 motivations to forming those institutions. One are wizard-run institutions that are about learning and sharing information. And then 2, organizations that benefit from an influx of new wizards. So those are people who have like an economic interest in producing more wizards, or maybe want a arcanely powered military, and so
They're churning them out.
Exactly.
Yeah. Training them up.
Let's start by talking a little bit about what wizard-run institutions would look like.
Well, the least restrictive institutions like this would be public spell libraries. There might be intro to magic courses taught at these, but the primary function of them is an warehouse of esoteric and mundane knowledge for the public and spells for wizards. It makes the most sense if these are created for the public good by an altruistic wizard or wizard organization.
Yeah, so this is kind of magic as a public utility, or wizard education as a public utility. I could imagine a particularly good wizard believes that magic will improve the lives of people, and so should be made readily available. And
Right of the public.
yeah, exactly. And once you get a powerful enough wizard, two things happen. One, you're probably like, well, I can thwart any problem that arises out of this. Like if I accidentally propel an evil person into wizardry, I'll just deal with that. Mm-hmm. And then
Powerful enough
the other
to do
thing
it.
is that, yeah, and then the other thing is that you probably got the time and the money to fund such a library if that's the thing you want to do with your time.
Especially if essentially this is a society that doesn't need money anymore.
Right. But I mean, a high level wizard also, I'm thinking
Money is
especially
no
once,
object.
yeah, I'm thinking especially
Spare no
once you get to
expense.
wish, it's like
Yeah.
you just like once a day, you're just like money. And then money appear, and then like a big pile of money appears.
Money.
Yeah.
That's your particular way of casting the spell. It's just
Yeah.
money.
Yeah.
Boom.
That's how I cast. It's only has a verbal spell component, so you just clear your throat and say money, and then
Boom.
that's it. Another form that an institution like this might take is a college or a university, or, of course, the possibility of a classic magical boarding school.
Watch out.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about She Who Shall Not Be Named or any intellectual property she benefits from.
I don't know what you're talking about anyway. I've stricken it from my mind.
Good,
Yeah,
you should.
yeah.
We all should. While such an institution could be operated for money, I think it's more likely that institutions like this are operated to promote a certain philosophy or political perspective.
State run?
No, well, I think this would at least start as a wizard-run organization. Well, when I mentioned philosophy or political perspective, what I mean is that you might have wizards found a school because they think wizards are wise enough and powerful enough that they should probably form the ruling class. And so they're not in power yet, but the goal is to basically get enough like wizards graduated from the school, they can just be like, okay, we're taking over your city now.
Don't worry
We
about
don't have
it.
to fight.
We got
because
you.
we're gonna win.
We're gonna
gonna take this. So, which is a really hostile political perspective, but you might also have the political perspective that, like, if there are wizard viziers in every society, then they can work together for peace.
I think that's The Witcher uses that model. In the Witcher universe, each of the kingdoms has a member of the same wizard organization for these reasons, and then they meet together and talk about
so it's kind of like wizards who graduate from the school, their first responsibility is to the school and the school's mission. Their second responsibility is to the nation that they're embedded in. And
then egos get involved, and then it's their own ultimate aims on top of everything
that sometimes
else.
Things don't work out the way you intend?
I'm not saying that, but I'm implying it.
Certainly feels like kind of the lesson of D&D is that things don't work out the way you intend them to.
Plan for 2 hours, and then everything goes off the rails in the first 10 minutes.
The other philosophies I was talking about might be the idea that you want to banish outside planar influences, maybe even the influence of the gods. You might think fiends, elementals, celestials, none of them should have any kind of power over how the world plays out.
Right.
That it should be in the hands of humanoids. And so that could be a reason that a wizard creates one of these institutions. So in this situation where institutions like this start to form around political or philosophical ideologies, it would make sense for there to be a copycat after that first one, and for them to not have the same philosophy. And in that case, then you get into an interesting scenario where schools might be attempting to create proprietary spells or offering additional resources to their members so that they can siphon maybe more politically neutral wizards towards their institution and away from others that they think of as enemies at worst or rivals at best.
Charm friends and influence people. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And if they're as politically aggressive as you've put before, then that could become warring, like all out war.
Yeah. I mean, this is one way I think in which you could, if you didn't like that idea of wizards as the grand unifier of a setting, it could very easily be that, like, there are a few institutions and they have very hard feelings about one another. And so it sort of hedges the power of wizards as a whole, because they're all involved in this, like, 4 or 5-way war between different magic schools.
And not just magic schools, but where people are getting their magic from. So if a particular organization is dead set against blocking out all the gods,
Right. Yeah.
then any institutions training clerics in magics
Right.
would have a vested interest in you
Yeah.
not doing the thing that you want to do.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Hello, friends. Dane here saying thank you for listening and sharing our show. Telling other people about Dispel Magic is the best way for us to grow, along with you rating and reviewing our show on whatever podcast app you use. We've also revamped our Patreon. Benjamin is writing monthly spells. There's a behind-the-screen show where we talk about our home games, along with other little extras we'll be sprinkling in here or there. So, if you like the show, please tell a friend, rate and review, and check out our Patreon. Thanks again for listening, and happy spelling.
When I'm thinking about becoming a wizard, it's how does one become a wizard if one doesn't have the means? So what are the means? You need to know how to read. You need to know how to decipher these things. You need the 50 gold per hour. You need the hour, right, to be able to copy these spells down. You make the point that in the book, there's no intelligence score requirements for becoming a wizard.
Yeah.
It just makes you better at
Yeah.
casting those spells. So that being the case, if this world is the primary position is being a wizard, then I feel the ones who are better able to cast the spells, then a hierarchy is starting to happen within the wizards. If you're not as good at it,
Yeah.
then you are in less demand.
Well, so that is complicated by the fact that some spells don't care. Like Magic Mouth doesn't matter.
You just do it.
You just do it. It's like an on-off switch. Nobody's rolling a saving throw or whatever else. It's just it happens or it doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
And there are probably enough spells like that you could really skate by as like an intelligence 6 wizard if you had to, just casting like kind of the basic utility.
one-offs.
And the infrastructural. I mean, like those are really, I think, where wizards would gain most of their power. It's not in fighting for the most part. It's in being able to produce large-scale societal changes. And for the most part, those aren't too impacted by your ability to cast spells. So, by your spell save DC or your spell attack modifier. And so your intelligence does not matter that much in those cases.
So in one way, it's pretty egalitarian. It's,
Right.
It's
Yeah.
levels the playing field.
Yeah. It would be funny as a house rule to just have like a situation where you could kind of differentiate the intelligence of the wizard by like the quality of the craftsmanship of the spell. For like a level, like if you're intelligence 6, your Magic Mouth like snarls sometimes when it shouldn't.
It's just rather
Or-
rude. There's
yeah.
just a certain edge to
yeah.
how it says things that
Right.
is disconcerting.
Yeah.
Maybe your thaumaturgy, the amplified voice that you use has like some
It wavers like
wavers,
you're like
goes in and
yeah,
out.
yeah. That'd be pretty fun. Not a rules as written thing, but
Just for the flavor.
yeah, but if you're going to really dive into this like wizards are everywhere scenario, that would be a fun way to differentiate to play with those differences.
I'm wondering where all of these inks and books and things are coming from. People have to now be fabricating these things in a world of wizards.
You mean as in with the spell fabricate?
Yeah.
Well, so they could. One thing that crossed my mind when I was doing this episode was that wizard schools could not hand out pre-made spell books
Right.
because they're each so individualized to
They're
each.
bespoke.
Yeah, I can imagine that they probably do. There's like a garden at the back of this wizard school, and a wizard just walks out there once a day and casts fabricate to convert everything in there to like magic ink that just drops into some huge like
Vat.
cauldron or vat or something that they've got there.
So then they need a druid on retainer for plant growth to keep that going.
Oh yeah. That's interesting. I had not even thought about that when I was preparing for this episode, but you probably would have like spells that are outside of what wizards can use, but would facilitate running institutions like this. And so they
They have to
call
hire
in.
them.
Yeah, they have to hire There's like the random druid that's on staff at the wizard school.
And I mean, I can't think of them off the top of my head of all the different spells that are just for that particular class. But I guess the one that I think of is the cleric's divine intervention.
Yeah, that's a feature, not a
Is it?
spell. Yeah.
It's considered magic, isn't it?
Well, I would assume so. I mean, you're asking your god to
Right.
intervene in a situation, so, but it's not a spell.
Okay, but in any case, it could be very useful. And if magic school wanted to use that, I think that it's a safer bet than wish.
That's the like, yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it for sure would be a safer bet than wish, but then you've also got to be asking for things that you're at least that god is not opposed to.
True. You have a stable of clerics
Yeah,
of the different
and you
gods.
have to be a pretty high level cleric to get
Yeah.
that in the first place. So
But we're talking post.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, we are talking about a world where these are bordering on common sites, and so yes, there would be high level clerics around. But I mean, I think if there's a god of magic, and like especially like a god of like learning and magic, then sure, there's probably like a high level cleric installed in each of these schools, or multiple high level clerics installed in each of these schools that do that.
So what do organizations that benefit from an influx of new wizards look like to you?
So I have a couple ideas, and I think we may have even touched on some of these concepts in past episodes. First is that you would again have an institution like a college or university, but this time instead of being something run to push a agenda, it's something done for profit. So nobles get in by paying up front. They're paying for their children to get in, up front. Massive tuitions that no one else could ever afford.
That seems
Yeah, I
kind
know.
of far-fetched.
Yeah,
I doubt that would
far-fetched,
actually
but-
happen in the real world, but okay.
Everyone else takes out debt that they agree to pay back over the remainder of their entire life.
Until money has no purpose.
Yeah, until money has no purpose, or someone realizes that system is stupid and
Ooh.
fixes it. This is a situation where if you're a mid-tier wizard or you're any level of merchant and you get your hands on a spell book, you might just get the bright idea like, hey, I could make some money. Like, 1,000 gold a year just for hosting lectures sounds pretty great. 1,000 gold per year per student. That's a kind of pretty straightforward example. But then you might also have a situation, which I think we talked about in the Tensors Floating Disc episode, which is the idea that you work for a company or a guild that includes spellcasters, and where becoming a spellcaster might be part of the way in which you climb the corporate ladder.
Right, yeah.
You start off your career as a jade miner, working in the jade mines, so that people can have the material components to cast Magic Mouth.
All the magic mouths they need.
And so, but then you don't have a family yet, so at night, instead of going home, you go straight to night school, where they train you on how to cast Magic Mouth, and you're slowly becoming a wizard. The company's offering that for free because the expectation is that you're going to be doing that for them when you graduate. And so then, you're a jade miner taking night classes until you graduate, and then you start working as a Magic
Foreman.
Mouth installer,
Yeah.
I guess.
Technician.
Yeah. I mean, broadly, we've been calling that position a hedge mage. I think that's a good way to keep talking about it. So you're graduating from, even just with Magic Mouth, you need jade miners, you need people to transport that, you need apiarists. There's a lot of like kind of mundane jobs to fill in a company that just basically does
Magic
Mouth. So I can picture there are a lot of either small companies or a few very huge companies like casting who specialize in casting a
One
lot
kind
of
of
spells
spell.
or in certain spells in conjunction. And so they're looking to promote people out of whatever those mundane positions are.
Well, just the plant growth and fabricate for food.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there are a lot of combinations like that where, we had talked about Demiplane and Animate Dead, to where you've got the people or not people, You've got
The former people.
the former people to just move things in and out of the demi-planes, and then if they get trapped inside, who cares?
Write them
'Cause
off.
it's just a corpse.
That's right.
Yeah.
More bones where that came from.
Yeah. Many more bones.
Many more bones. Especially with the population spike of having abundant food is.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Anyway, that's a long way of saying that when you combine this feature with the impact of some of the spells we previously discussed, especially those spells that have rendered other forms of labor moot, like in recent episodes we've talked about plant growth and fabricate, and how much work that eliminates from the job market. When you consider all those things, there should be a fairly sizable percentage of the population who really have nothing else to do. Well, not nothing else to do as in they got nothing better to do with their time, but as in like this is the employment that exists, is becoming a spellcaster.
There's only one
you
option.
Better start becoming a spellcaster.
Right.
What that gets to is that when you introduce institutions that educate or produce wizards, and especially when you've got external stressors, I guess, pushing people into needing a new kind of work, that's going to have an accelerating effect on the societal changes we often talk about on the show. With financial and social incentives to join these institutions, like I imagine for the most part, being a hedge mage pays a lot more than being a jade miner. It also probably has a lot more social prestige. These kinds of institutions would probably get more applicants than they could even accept, which then leads to the idea that we kind of briefly touched on earlier, which is that you're not going to have just one of these institutions. You're going to have a variety of these institutions form, each kind of forming their own niche in terms of who they're trying to educate, what they're trying to educate them about, and kind of what other kind of values they're trying to instill in those people that go to those institutions.
I could also see a problem with overqualification,
Oh,
where
like
so many people are being trained by all of these different places,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone's hungry to get to the next level, that you do have magic mouth hedge mages acting as or working as jade miners to look for that next opening, to wait for a spot
Oh, right. Okay.
to clear out. I mean, that happens here and now to this day. People coming from other countries who are trained as surgeons don't have a chance to enter the medical field.
Right.
So, I could see this happening here too. Overqualified people, overeducated people having to work these more mundane jobs.
It could be. I mean, in this particular case, if you can cast Magic Mouth and the company that does all of the big Magic Mouth derived tech stuff, like builds Magic Mouth computers or jukeboxes or whatever, is not able to hire you or willing to hire you, you can always just go find a noble. You can always just freelance.
It's true.
Although, who knows?
If you're able to.
Yes, that's true.
Freelancing sucks for me. Anytime I've tried it, I get...
Yeah, but if you cast Magic Mouth once and you charge 20 gold, that's more than you're going to make being a jade miner in like 5 years, 10 years.
Sure.
So
I see
you have to
everything...
find a customer one time.
Everything that we're talking about in this particular episode has such close parallels
Right.
to what it
Right.
is in the actual world
Yeah.
that, like, I'm having a hard time differentiating between a D&D semi-medieval world
Right.
and how technology works with us here today.
Yeah. I mean, I sort of suspected when I started Dispel, or when I originally thought of the idea for the show, that that's where it would end up.
Yeah.
But it has gotten there faster than I thought it would. I thought it would be like all of the puzzle pieces of different spells would gradually fit together. But actually, it's like there's like 2 spells that ruin the whole, like that ultimately produce this situation.
Well, it's similar to the singularity that you're talking about. Like, there's a gradual incline and then suddenly, woof, right up through the roof. That's what's been happening with the show, and that's what would happen in this.
Yeah, so you mentioned the idea that people could be overqualified. Another thing that might be true is that when that gets to be the case, that's when people might search for the next. I mean, just like in the tech industry where there's like innovation is this word that almost is made fun of, or is made fun of.
You're
Yeah,
gonna
disrupt
the
and
industry.
innovate. Right. That's where I think you would get into spellcasters would be looking to find new applications to spells that people haven't thought of before, or anxious to create a new spell altogether that fills some need that's not currently being addressed.
Variations on Magic Mouth or Tensor's floating disk, and
Yeah, I mean, part of our Patreon is our patrons are getting free spells every month, and this month I really was inspired by like things like, oh, there should be a spell that's basically radio, the spell. There should be a spell that's
Yeah.
basically photograph, the spell.
Yeah.
And so I wrote spells like that, and I was like, totally there would be a spell that's just like you point a thing, you pointed it at blank canvas, and you get a picture of the thing you pointed at.
I've definitely made a text messaging system in one of my
Yeah,
games.
yeah.
Because it's useful.
Yeah, well, I mean, for sure, because of our modern look, these seem very obvious.
Yeah.
But it makes sense that since creating new spells is a possible thing, even if there's nothing in any D&D book that says you can, we know based on the fact that there are some spells named Tensor's floating disk, that there's a wizard out there named Tensor who wrote this spell, so it must be possible to write spells.
There's a precedent.
Right. So in that situation where there's no new work, I think that's where you get incubators of like 8 hedge mages all sitting around.
Come on, we gotta
trying to come up with like a killer spell.
All right, it's a bird, and you talk to the bird, and it goes and tells everybody you know the thing that you said. We'll call it
Tweeter.
Tweeter. They can tweet at people, and then everyone will yell at each other through it and have arguments.
Exactly. One little side note here as we're starting to wind down is that even if you don't like the idea of a wizard becoming, or of a setting becoming overpopulated with wizards specifically, institutions like this might still exist and train people just in the magic initiate or ritual caster feat, both of which will still do a lot of the stuff that we've talked about, either because with magic initiate, you're getting first level spells and cantrips, or with ritual caster, you're able to cast rituals, and a lot of the spells we've talked about that are game changers are rituals.
The more you can do it, the more it changes the world.
Exactly.
Well, and I think that with the number of magic users ballooning and the singularity happening, not only are there more spell casters, but there's more chance of people casting things like Wish.
Right. Yeah.
And the problem solved for that wouldn't just be the one Wishinati, group. They'd have to come up with something more permanent to police this.
You could probably use the spell Wish to know who alive is going to learn Wish if they remain alive.
Oh my god.
And then you just prune
that is dark.
potential
That is
like
dark.
rising stars that could join the Wishinati.
I would hope that there would be. So we're getting into Minority Report. Before you
Right,
even,
yeah.
I've got this wooden ball with your name on it, and I gotta kill you because of that.
Yeah, sorry, you're gonna learn the Wish spell one day if I don't do this. So
I mean, if that's what the Wish spell says, then you keep an eye on him.
right, you just keep an eye on him.
You keep an eye on him, and then at the crucial point, you come in and you're like,
Or you could maybe
You don't
just,
want-
maybe
you don't
could-
want to.
maybe the Wishinati would get together and just cast Wish to wish that no one knew could learn the spell Wish.
so you're eliminating it. You're eliminating it from the world. That's breaking vanilla D&D.
Yeah. Yeah.
You'd have to.
Well, what's the fun in not breaking vanilla D&D? There's no fun in that.
There's no fun in not breaking.
Sort of the premise of this entire show.
But what is fun is tweeting at us about your thoughts on today's episode. What did exploring the wizard class inspire for your game at home? You can tweet us at Dispel Magic Pod on Twitter. You whisper it to a little bird, and it goes and it flies around. Is that your bird?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's the best bird I can do.
Yeah, that's a pretty good word.
Oh, it was? Just from the way you said it, I assumed you didn't think it was.
I changed my mind
Okay.
mid-sentence.
All right. Well, thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you again after your next long rest.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Dispel Magic. If this has inspired any ideas for your game, or you have another take on today's topic, please let us know on Twitter at DispelMagicPod. You can find Benjamin at Sterling Vermin and Dane at Dane in Danger. Thank you to Slim Mittens for our cover art, produced by Benjamin Huffman, produced and edited by Dane Fox-McGraw.